Welcome to today's micro-training about the Exploratory Call and Applicant Impact Survey, presented by FEMA's Public Assistance Training Section. The Exploratory Call has been an established part of the public assistance grants delivery process for several years. The Applicant Impact Survey, on the other hand, was introduced in late 2020 due to programmatic changes made in response to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the survey has since been incorporated into the process for all public assistance declarations, not just those related to the pandemic. Exploratory calls for disasters declared on or after September 7, 2020 now follow a new process that includes either obtaining or validating applicant responses to an Applicant Impact Survey. For disasters declared prior to September 7, 2020, the exploratory call process and objectives are still similar, except that you will ask the more traditional set of questions instead of completing the Applicant Impact Survey during the call. More information is available in the Exploratory Call Guide and Checklist that was published in October of 2020. This microtraining focuses on the new process for disasters declared after September 7th. It is geared towards the Program Delivery Manager role, but the information is useful for anyone working within FEMA's Public Assistance Program. In today's microtraining, you will learn where the Exploratory Call and the Applicant Impact Survey fit within the context of the Public Assistance Disaster Grants process. You'll learn how to prepare for the Exploratory Call as a Program Delivery Manager. You'll learn how to conduct an exploratory call, during which you will validate or complete the Applicant Impact Survey responses, and how to document that exploratory call in FEMA's Grants Manager system. You'll also learn the activities that follow the exploratory call and the Applicant Impact Survey. So, let's get started. First, we'll talk about how the exploratory call and the Applicant Impact Survey fit in the public assistance process. This illustration shows all phases of the public assistance process, including the major steps involved in each phase. You can see the Exploratory Call and Applicant Impact Survey fall near the very beginning, immediately after the recipient and FEMA approve an applicant's request for public assistance. First, though, let's go over a little history. In the Public Assistance Program, it used to be that all applicants were assigned a FEMA Program Delivery Manager, also referred to as a PDMG. Program Delivery Managers would conduct exploratory calls with each applicant, and the exploratory call traditionally provided FEMA and the recipient with valuable initial information about an applicant's impacts and capabilities, which helped with strategic planning for effective recovery operations. However, with the introduction of the streamlined project application during the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, applicants were not necessarily assigned Program Delivery Managers anymore, which meant exploratory calls were not always conducted. Without these exploratory calls, FEMA and the recipient were no longer getting the early information they needed for effective planning. As a result, the Applicant Impact Survey was introduced as a mechanism for gathering this information from those applicants that did not have assigned Program Delivery Managers. Since then, however, the use of this survey has expanded to include applicants for all FEMA disasters, regardless of whether a Program Delivery Manager is assigned. Where that puts us today is basically that if an applicant does not have an assigned Program Delivery Manager, they complete the Applicant Impact Survey and Grants portal and then watch a recovery scoping video. If an applicant does have an assigned Program Delivery Manager, the exploratory call is still conducted. The applicant will have the ability in Grants portal to complete the Applicant Impact Survey in advance of the exploratory call, but they are not required to do so ahead of time. During the exploratory call, the Program Delivery Manager will either validate the applicant's answers to the survey, if they responded beforehand, or they will walk the applicant through the Applicant Impact Survey questions to gather that information. The exploratory call, when a Program Delivery Manager is assigned, is then followed by the recovery scoping meeting. The Public Assistance Program sets some performance expectations for Program Delivery Managers regarding the exploratory call. These are found in FEMA's Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, as well as the Exploratory Call Guide and Checklist. One expectation is to conduct the actual exploratory call within 7 working days of being assigned an applicant. Another is to complete the exploratory call follow-up actions, which we'll cover towards the end of this microtraining, within 1 day of conducting the call. A third expectation is to conduct the recovery scoping meeting within 21 working days of being assigned an applicant. The recovery scoping meeting should be scheduled during the exploratory call whenever possible. These expectations are in place to help the process run efficiently and consistently. At the same time, understand these are guidelines. They are targets FEMA is aiming for as a whole, but there may be disaster or applicant-specific exceptions. When in doubt, talk with your disaster leadership to resolve any concerns or questions about expectations in your particular case. One way a program delivery manager can help their applicants and keep the process moving is to start a draft list of impacts using the damage inventory template available in Grants Manager, as well as the preliminary information gathered in each exploratory call. The program delivery manager can then share that draft template with the applicant to help them get started on their list of impacts. Sometimes it's just easier for an applicant to build from some initial examples than to start from a completely blank form. The goal is to have this initial draft, not the final list of impacts, done within a day after the exploratory call so that the applicant can get started as quickly as possible. Just keep in mind that the draft list should be started after the exploratory call has ended, not during the call, but the information in the draft comes from that conversation. Next, let's cover the objectives of the exploratory call. These are the things you as a program delivery manager will want to accomplish by the end of the call. They are also found in the exploratory call guide and checklist. The first objective of the call is to establish a good working relationship with your applicant. This cannot be stressed enough because it sets the stage for the rest of your interactions with that applicant. You can use your initial conversation with the applicant to assess their capabilities and experience. This includes their organization's disaster experience with FEMA, the applicant representative's personal disaster experience with FEMA on behalf of their organization, their understanding of and history with Grants Portal, and their technological capabilities, such as their proficiency with computers and any issues with connectivity. For example, have they logged into Grants Portal yet? Have they worked with FEMA in past disasters? How long ago was that? Do they have any concerns about internet connectivity? Things like that. The next objective is to make sure that the applicant understands the public assistance program and the role of the program delivery manager in walking them through the process. So you can explain the program delivery manager is the applicant's primary point of contact with FEMA throughout the grants formulation process. You can also explain the basics of the public assistance grant program and how it works. Also remember to cover topics like environmental compliance, historic preservation, mitigation, insurance, and procurement. It's very important that applicants understand these issues and their implications, since they can significantly impact grant funding eligibility. Another objective is to identify the applicant's incident-related impacts and understand their recovery needs and priorities. This helps towards organizing the list of impacts, which, as we said before, is prepared using the damage inventory template in Grants Manager. Last but not least, the exploratory call is used to schedule the recovery scoping meeting. This includes identifying and coordinating with the appropriate points of contact who will need to attend. Keep in mind, FEMA may want to bring specialists in environmental and historic preservation issues, hazard mitigation, insurance, or other technical areas depending on the applicant's damages. This is another reason you'll want to have talked about these topics with your applicant during the exploratory call. Likewise, the applicant may have specific points of contact who are subject matter experts about the impacts they sustained. Also, if for some reason the recovery scoping meeting cannot be scheduled during the exploratory call, make sure to schedule it as soon as possible afterwards. Also, you can discuss with the applicant during the exploratory call the documentation they should start gathering and reiterate the programmatic deadlines that start once the recovery scoping meeting has taken place, mainly that they have 60 days from that meeting date to complete their list of impacts. It's also important to identify any scheduling limitations on the applicant's part. For instance, some applicants serve as emergency managers only in a part-time capacity, or sometimes even as a volunteer. They may have other jobs and roles, such as firefighter or farmer, that limit their availability to factors unrelated to the disaster. So it helps to understand what those limitations might be. Within Grants Manager, the Program Delivery Manager will use the Applicant Impact Survey to accomplish many, but not all, of these objectives. Also, for disasters declared prior to September 7, 2020, the Exploratory Call questionnaire will be used instead. Okay, now that we understand the purpose of the Exploratory Call and the Applicant Impact Survey, we'll talk next about the steps you can take as a Program Delivery Manager to prepare for the Exploratory Call. Several resources are available to help you prepare. The most pertinent are listed in the Exploratory Call Guide and Checklist, which we mentioned earlier. This guide is available in the Public Assistance Program Delivery Toolbox. To get there, go to the Toolbox site on SharePoint. In the FEMA Process section, you'll select the Position Guidance folder and then the PDMG Positions Guidance folder. Scroll down until you see the Exploratory Call guide, and you can open it from there. This guide basically contains the same information we are sharing today. It also includes appendices with actual scripts you can follow to conduct the exploratory call. Keep in mind that at this time, some disasters may still be using the former exploratory call questions. We are focusing, as we said today, on the new process in this microtraining, but the exploratory call guide contains guidance for both. The next slides cover information found in the guide about preparing for the exploratory call. You can start by reviewing disaster and applicant information. The most recent Disaster Operations Brief and Disaster Operating Profile will contain useful information specific to the disaster you are supporting. You may also find helpful information about your applicant in Grants Manager. Look for things like the Preliminary Damage Assessment if available. If an applicant participated in the Preliminary Damage Assessment, you may be able to review the materials they submitted at that time to get an initial sense of their scope and scale. There's also the Request for Public Assistance that may have more information. There's the Applicant Briefing information. You should be able to determine in Grants Manager whether or not your applicant attended an applicant briefing, and if so, make sure you're familiar with the information that was covered at that time. There are also the Applicant Impact Survey responses if they were answered. So if they already responded to this survey prior to the exploratory call, you will see their answers in the Preliminary Applicant Information section of their applicant profile in Grants Manager. You can also look at their organization profile, where it will list recent declaration experience in the Event PA Requests section. Keep in mind, though, that Grants Manager has only been in use since 2017, so not all prior disaster experience will be listed. Also keep in mind that the staff who supported prior declarations may not be the same ones that are in place now, so don't make assumptions about an applicant's experience solely by what's listed in this section. Next, make sure you're familiar with current public assistance program information. Specifically, you'll want to review the latest Program Delivery Manager Position Assist and Addendum, which is also available in the toolbox. You'll want to be familiar with the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide that's in effect for your disaster. This guide is often referred to as the Papa G. The one that is applicable to your disaster is the one that was in effect on the disaster declaration date. Lastly, make sure you are comfortable explaining the outcome-based recovery options available to your applicant, such as public assistance alternative procedures, expedited projects, improved projects, and also alternate projects, 406 mitigation funding, and rebuilding up to updated codes and standards. Finally, there are a few steps you'll want to take to plan for the actual call. First, talk with your Program Delivery Task Force lead to make sure you're familiar with the exploratory call guidance in effect for your particular disaster. You'll also want to find a quiet location to hold your call. So, for instance, if you work from home, this still applies. You may just be planning around your housemates rather than your coworkers. Make sure to have a copy of your calendar for the next 30 days handy so that you can schedule the recovery scoping meeting during the call, if possible. And ideally, you'll want to print a copy of the applicable appendix from the exploratory call guide and checklist so you can use it to take notes during your call. Some program delivery managers opt to send an email ahead of the exploratory call just to introduce themselves and put the applicant on alert that they should be expecting a call soon. Certain disasters require introductory emails and may call for exploratory calls to be scheduled, so talk with your disaster leadership about their expectations. All of the resources that we've just mentioned here should be enough to get you started as a program delivery manager in preparing for the exploratory call. So let's talk next about conducting the actual call. In this section, we'll talk about the process of conducting the exploratory call and how the conversation generally flows. It's important to take good notes during the call since you typically will not enter any information into Grants Manager until after the call is over. As mentioned earlier, the exploratory call guide and checklist provides templates in the appendices to guide the conversation. We mentioned earlier not to underestimate the importance of the exploratory call in laying the groundwork for a good working relationship between FEMA and the applicant. To do this well, we need to step back for a moment from the process and remember, We're all humans working with other humans, so start the exploratory call keeping in mind that the person you're working with may be managing their own personal recovery from the disaster in addition to that of the organization they represent. Be sensitive to this reality and listen to what they have to say. Empathize with their circumstances as best you can, and try to understand how those circumstances might impact their involvement in FEMA's grants process. You can also take this opportunity to learn about their past disaster experience and capabilities, which will help you determine the level of support they might need. Remember, FEMA's mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters, so keep this in the forefront of your interactions with your applicants. Also remember, the FEMA PA grant process may be overwhelming to first-time applicants. The applicant's previous experience with FEMA, if they have some, may not have been positive. The applicant may still be in response mode themselves. So just remember, active listening is important for a successful exploratory call. Make sure to just be ready, be knowledgeable, be on time, and above all, be professional, courteous, respectful, and polite. With that in mind, then, use the exploratory call to establish an open line of communication with your applicant. Find out their immediate needs, priorities, and preferences. As you complete or review the applicant's impact survey responses with them, make sure to take detailed notes about things like the type of damage, the technical expertise needed, any environmental and historical considerations, eligibility issues, critical infrastructure impacts, any immediate needs or shortfalls, and any recovery challenges the applicant might be facing. This helps ensure that the correct people attend the recovery scoping meeting and that the recovery for the applicant is based on their priorities. The length of the exploratory call will vary by applicant. Current guidance says to plan for at least 15 to 20 minutes, although realistically it will be longer. Generally, though, it shouldn't take more than an hour in most cases. After learning about the applicant's initial impacts, past experience, and current capabilities, you can then begin to explain at a high level how the public assistance program works, as well as the role of the program delivery manager in the process. Next, you'll start walking through the questions in the Applicant Impact Survey, either to validate the responses the applicant already provided, or to explain and answer each of the questions in the survey with the applicant's input. Grants Manager allows either the applicant or the Program Delivery Manager to complete that survey, so in some cases the answers will already be in the system, in other cases the answers will not be there yet, and the Program Delivery Manager may end up actually responding on the applicant's behalf based on the information they provide. Just keep in mind you'll want to have this survey available to you outside of the Grants Manager system so that you can take good notes as the conversation flows. The reason you don't enter the information in the system during the call is so that you can focus on the applicant during this important call rather than on the mechanics of the system. Past experience has just taught us that trying to do both at the same time usually does not work well. The Applicant Impact Survey itself starts with 3 sections of survey questions. The first section asks the applicant about overall disaster impacts and starts by asking the estimated total cost to address all incident-related impacts. What FEMA generally infers from the applicant in this question is that if the total is less than the large project threshold, the applicant will only have small projects. If the total is greater than the threshold, the applicant may have both large and small projects depending on the categories of work and the dollar values involved. If the total is greater than $1 million, FEMA may need to notify Congress before obligating that applicant's funds. The second question in Section 1 asks whether the applicant's impacts involved debris, emergency response or protective measures, and/or infrastructure damage. Any or all of these can be selected in that question. Section 2 includes more detailed questions about the applicant's specific impacts. The exact questions in this section will depend on their responses in the previous section, but the topics generally cover the extent of impacts and/or the need for immediate support, the status of the work, whether it's completed, in progress, or not started yet, the specific environmental and/or historic preservation considerations, such as proximity to water, whether or not any undisturbed ground would be affected by the proposed repairs, the age of the damaged facilities, and a few others. Also, it asks about total approximate costs, both for emergency and permanent work categories. Lastly, for infrastructure projects, or what we in FEMA know as permanent work, or categories C through G, The survey asks whether the applicant anticipates any changes to pre-disaster design, function, or capacity. This helps FEMA know whether the applicant could be proposing alternate, improved, or mitigated projects in their recovery plans. Section 3 of the survey again refers to all impacts and asks about how the applicant plans to address their impacts if they know at this time. For instance, the applicant might choose to use its own labor forces and materials to complete repairs, or they may choose to outsource all or some of the work via contract. They may also utilize donated resources or mutual aid to complete all or portions of the work. Section 2 also asks about whether the applicant has insurance, whether claims have been filed, and whether any settlements have yet been reached. This helps FEMA ensure that there is no duplication of benefits when providing public assistance funding to the applicant. The Applicant Impact Survey allows the applicants to upload documents if they have them available. However, documents are not required to complete the survey within Grants Portal or Grants Manager. At this stage, as a program delivery manager, in discussing documents, you can focus primarily on the general documents at this time, such as insurance policies, pay-related information like fringe benefits and calculations, their payroll register, their pay policy, and if they're pursuing contract work, the applicant's procurement policy, if they've already contracted or are planning to contract any of the work. During the exploratory call, you're not going to focus much on project-specific documentation like pictures, load tickets, or timesheets, other than to explain to them the types of documentation FEMA will need later to support their claims. Those will be more important to have during the recovery scoping meeting and as the applicant assembles their list of impacts on the damage inventory template. At this point in the call, it is helpful to introduce the applicant to and stress the importance of the damage inventory template, which they will use to develop their list of impacts. The point is not to fill out the template right then and there, but to explain that this list will contain all of the applicant's incident-related damage information. You can also explain the information that FEMA is seeking in that template. In other words, what the various fields and column headings mean. Also, you can explain that for each line item, the list of impacts should include a brief description of the damage, or the response activity, the location, the repairs made, and the applicant's priorities for recovery. Also make sure to communicate the formatting requirements and restrictions of the template, such as don't change any headings, don't move any columns around or change any formatting, don't delete or add any columns, don't leave blank rows between entries, and things like that. Lastly, as mentioned before, you as the program delivery manager can build a draft template for the applicant right after that exploratory call based on the initial damages that are discussed. And then you can share that draft with the applicant to help them get started. You do want to try to do this within a day after the exploratory call just to keep things moving. If possible, the program delivery manager will schedule the recovery scoping meeting, or RSM, during the exploratory call. The details discussed earlier in the call help the program delivery manager and the applicant determine who else should attend the meeting besides the applicant and the program delivery manager. For instance, the applicant may have subject matter experts that have detailed knowledge about a particular facility or work to be conducted or already conducted. Also, if there are environmental, historic preservation, mitigation, or insurance-related issues, the program delivery manager may want to invite FEMA specialists in these areas. This is also a good time to find out any scheduling limitations the applicant might have, as we mentioned before, as well as to explain to the applicant the programmatic timelines that start with the recovery scoping meeting, mainly that they have 60 calendar days to complete their list of impacts on the damage inventory template. It's also good to make sure the applicant understands what information to gather in preparation for the recovery scoping meeting, such as the more detailed documentation mentioned earlier, like pictures and load tickets, amongst others. At the end of the call, make sure your applicant understands their next steps. In particular, if your applicant is a non-critical private nonprofit that has permanent work projects, which we know as category C through G, they will first need to submit a loan request to the Small Business Administration, or SBA, before submitting a project application to FEMA for that work. Applicants can begin working on their list of impacts, as we mentioned, either on their own or with the help of the program delivery manager. They can also upload initial documents as applicable to their situation into grants portal, things like their pay policies, procurement policies, insurance policies, contracts, and then with their list of impacts, any other related documents that support the claims that they are listing there. Applicants will attend the recovery scoping meeting as scheduled after the exploratory call, and then include any subject matter experts from their organization that may need to attend as well. Also, make sure at the end of the exploratory call to exchange contact information with the applicant, if you haven't already, and let them know they'll receive a confirmation call one day prior to the recovery scoping meeting, just to confirm the details like the date, the time, location, and attendees. Once the call is complete, you can begin documenting the exploratory call in Grants Manager, which is FEMA's interface to the system that's used for managing the public assistance grants delivery process. The companion interface for non-FEMA users is Grants Portal, which is used by public assistance recipients, applicants, and subrecipients. Both Grants Manager and Grants Portal are entry points into the same overall system, which is technically called FactTracks, but this is what allows FEMA and non-FEMA users to share information in near real time. So to get to the exploratory call information in Grants Manager, first search for your applicant in Grants Manager by looking in the Pre-Award Ops section and then under Applicant Profiles. One thing I'll point out with these slides is that Grants Manager is constantly being developed, so there may be some slight variations in screens from what you're seeing in this video. Just know that where the screens may be slightly different, the concepts we're sharing have not changed. In this screen, you can use the filters or the quick search option to help narrow the list as you're searching for your applicant profile. Once you've located your applicant in the list, open their profile by clicking on the blue magnifying glass in the far left column on the list. This will open the applicant profile. From here, you can either click the blue hyperlink in the area we call the Yellow Brick Road, or you can scroll down to the exploratory call section of the applicant profile, which is what that blue hyperlink above does for you automatically. As a program delivery manager, you may also have a task bell in the upper right for completing the exploratory call. If you prefer to use the task bell to get to that call, just click on the bell and then click on Review next to the task directing you to complete the exploratory call for that applicant. This will basically take you to the same place in the applicant profile as the other steps we just mentioned. In some disasters, leadership may ask you to schedule the exploratory call. In others, they may not. So if you need to schedule the exploratory call, the preferred method is to schedule manually. However, some prefer to schedule on the calendar because it will let you see other calls currently in your schedule. Click the option that works best for you, and then follow the steps to schedule the call. To document the actual exploratory call in Grants Manager, you will click on the Call Options button on the right end of the exploratory call information section, and then choose the Meet Now option to open the exploratory call. You can also record attempted calls if you tried to conduct a call but were not successful in reaching the applicant at that time. Once you click on Meet Now, you will see a screen much like the one shown here, where it asks, "Did the applicant answer?" Click Yes to begin filling in the exploratory call information in Grants Manager. For most disasters at this point, the progress bar will look much like the one shown here, which is nearly identical to what an applicant sees in the Applicant Impact Survey in Grants Portal. It contains the Start section, the 3 questionnaire sections we talked about earlier, the Documents section, even though documents are not required for this survey, and the Submit section. The only difference is that the exploratory call in Grants Manager also includes a section for scheduling the recovery scoping meeting. Also, please remember it's possible for some of these questions to be pre-populated if the applicant began or completed the Applicant Impact Survey in Grants Portal prior to your exploratory call. The exploratory call in Grants Manager starts with the same preliminary information provided to the applicant in Grants Portal as you're seeing here. The Program Delivery Manager can review this information and then click Proceed at the bottom of the screen. You may need to scroll down to see that based on your screen resolution. It's also helpful to remember the Save button at the top of the page. Clicking Save ensures your answers are saved in the system as you move from one screen to the next. As mentioned earlier, Section 1 of the questionnaire addresses an applicant's overall impacts from the declared incident, such as the total anticipated cost to address all incident-related impacts and the specific types of impacts sustained, namely debris, emergency response and protective measures, and infrastructure damage. If the applicant already filled out the Applicant Impact Survey in Grants Portal, their responses will show here. Even if this is true, the Program Delivery Manager is still responsible for completing the exploratory call in Grants Manager. So after completing or validating Section 1, based on the information gathered in the exploratory call, the Program Delivery Manager will click Proceed and move on to the next section, Section 2. This one contains questions specific to the types of impacts identified in Section 1, meaning the debris, emergency response, and protective measures or infrastructure damage, as the case may be for each applicant. Only the questions pertinent to the impacts the applicant sustained will be asked in this section. So for instance, if they only selected debris removal, they will not have questions about infrastructure damage or permanent work. Fill in all the answers, scrolling down as necessary, and then click Proceed at the bottom. This takes you to Section 3, which asks about how the applicant plans to conduct the work to address the impacts, such as it being done in-house, contracted, by donated resources, or mutual aid, and whether or not there's insurance or any claims that have been submitted or any settlements reached. After answering these questions, click Proceed at the bottom right, and you'll be taken to the Documents section. As we said earlier, the ability to add documents is part of the Applicant Impact Survey, but documents are not required at this time. We'll still explain this section to make sure you're aware of how it works should you need to use it or explain to an applicant how it works. The document tree is generated based on the responses given to earlier questions in the survey. Keep in mind the Documents section may have multiple links for adding documents based on the variety of documents requested. So for instance, in this case we see only one Add Document link, but depending on the tree that's built for your particular applicant, you may see more, and they'll be specific to the type of documentation that the system is looking for. You, or if in Grants Portal, the applicant would repeat the document upload steps for each category of documents listed, like insurance, procurement, etc. So to add a document, you'll just click on the blue Add Document link next to the type of document you want to upload. The interface you'll see next for attaching documents in Grants Manager is shown here. The corresponding interface in Grants Portal is essentially identical. There are a few tricks that may not be obvious here though, so we'll walk through each section. The top area is where you can either drag and drop documents or click on the box to navigate to the document on your computer. Of course, if you're a Program Delivery Manager doing this on behalf of an applicant, you will have to have received documents already from your applicant in some way in order for you to upload them here. In any case, if you click inside the box to attach a file, you'll see a box much like this one. And here you'll navigate to the file that you want to upload on your computer, then click Open. So this file doesn't show one, but if prompted to include a description, it's worth adding one at this time. For example, rather than just insurance policy, the description can explain that the attachment is the insurance policy in effect from date X to date Y, whatever those might be. After entering the description, the selected file will appear in the Selected Documents to Attach section, as shown in this example. Now this is a point that sometimes causes confusion. It's very important to click the Attach Selected button when exiting this screen. Don't just click the X in the upper right corner once something is in the Selected Documents to Attach section, or else the selected documents may not actually be attached to the record and you'll have to repeat these steps. You might think of this screen a little bit like online shopping. The Selected Documents to Attach section is like your shopping cart, and the green Attach Selected button at the bottom is like the checkout button. In other words, the documents in the Selected Documents section are not actually attached in the system until you check out, or in this case, until you click Attach Selected. Likewise, some applicants may have other documents already uploaded in the system that are available to attach to this record. If that's the case, those documents will show in the Available Documents to Attach section. Those might be thought of in the shopping analogy like items that were marked Save for Later. If the documents are available here, the applicant can choose which of them should also be attached to the survey. An example could be an insurance policy that was in effect for another disaster and is also in effect for the current one. Once all documents have been selected for upload, click on Attach Selected to proceed. After attaching your selected documents, you'll be returned to the Documents page. As mentioned earlier, you can attach documents to multiple parts of the document tree, which the system builds automatically based on the answers provided in the survey. For each type of document you plan to upload, then, repeat the steps we just walked through by clicking the Add Document button or link next to the type of document you wish to upload. Again, these are not required at this time, but this is explained just so that you have an understanding of how this section of the system works. Once all documents are uploaded and you're back to this page, then click on Proceed. The next section asks for details of the recovery scoping meeting. If you weren't able to schedule one during the exploratory call, click No here and provide the reason. Otherwise, click Yes and enter the meeting details, such as the conference number and PIN, the location for the meeting, and any other pertinent notes. Any fields with an asterisk next to them are required. Also, don't forget to add attendees to the recovery scoping meeting. We'll show you those steps here next. Below the recovery scoping meeting details we just looked at is a section called Attendees. In that section, click the green Add Attendee button to add an attendee to the recovery scoping meeting. The pop-up window that appears will let you choose from the list the type of attendee you are adding. Depending on the type of attendee you select, you will either be able to select from a list of names already in the system, such as shown here, or you will be able to enter the attendee's name and contact information in the spaces provided. Grants Manager also, in this case, reminds you that program delivery managers do not need to be added as the recovery scoping meeting attendees since they're already included automatically on all correspondence. Click Save on this screen to add your attendee, then repeat these steps for each attendee for the recovery scoping meeting. As you enter recovery scoping meeting attendees, they will be listed in the attendees section of the exploratory call. If you are on a disaster in which field leadership asks for additional notes about the exploratory call, you can enter them via the View Details/Notes button in the upper right. When you're finished entering the recovery scoping meeting details, click Proceed at the bottom of the section, and again, you may need to scroll down to see that. The last step in documenting the exploratory call in Grants Manager is to review all the responses provided, which are listed in the Review section. You'll need to scroll down to see all responses. Unfortunately, at this time, there's no option to print these responses or save them in a portable document format or PDF. However, they are available for viewing both within Grants Manager and Grants Portal at any time. So if in your review you find errors that need correction, you can fix them by clicking the Back button at the bottom of each section. This is true for all pages, not just for this last review page. If no errors are found, you can click Save and Complete to complete the exploratory call. It's important to make sure you do click this button in Grants Manager and not just exit the page, because doing that action, clicking that button, is what marks the exploratory call complete in the system, and that also triggers communications to the applicant and all of the other parties that you identified for attending the recovery scoping meeting. It also ensures that the Applicant Impact Survey is completed, and those responses are now viewable in the preliminary applicant information section of the Applicant Profile. So congratulations, you've now successfully completed the exploratory call in Grants Manager. However, there are still a few post-call activities that need to be managed, so let's review those next. Here's a breakdown of the follow-up tasks program delivery managers should strive to complete within one business day after conducting the exploratory call. One is to update Grants Manager with details of the exploratory call. We just talked about how to do this, but important elements include entering the pertinent details about the recovery scoping meeting, such as the date, location, conference information, the participants, and their contact information, adding any pertinent notes, particularly if your disaster leadership requires you to do so, and making sure that that exploratory call was marked complete in Grants Manager, which ensures that the Applicant Impact Survey is also marked as complete. Another post-call activity is to follow up on any unresolved issues from the call, such as coordinating the recovery scoping meeting date if it couldn't be scheduled at the time of the call, or contacting your task force leader about any pressing issues, concerns, or immediate needs that were raised in that call. Another action is to send a thank you email to the applicant after the call. Include things like the applicant information documents, procurement brochures, recovery scoping meeting guide, the draft list of impacts, which you can either do in that thank you email or the next day, depending on when that thank you email goes out. But as we mentioned earlier, try to get that draft. If you're going to support your applicant with a draft, try to do that within a day of the exploratory call so that they can get started right away. In your email, you can also explain how to find the documents that are available in Grants Portal in the Support Center under Resources. This includes things like the Damage Inventory Template, the Damage Inventory Development Job Aid, that may be helpful, the Applicant's Grants Portal User Manual, that may also be helpful to them, links to the applicable PAPA-G, or the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide. Just remember, too, that the applicable one depends on when the disaster was declared, so be sure to check those dates when you share this with your applicant. Also, if there are file naming conventions that are applicable to a given disaster, you can share those with your applicant as well. So with that, this pretty much wraps up our micro-training about the Exploratory Call and Applicant Impact Survey. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Let's take a moment, though, before we finish to just recap some of the highlights. In a nutshell, for disasters declared on or after September 7th, 2020, as we mentioned, applicants without program delivery managers will complete the Applicant Impact Survey in Grants Portal after their request for public assistance is approved, and then they will watch a recovery scoping video in order to move forward in the public assistance process. Their list of impacts is typically created through the Grants Portal Streamlined Project application. Applicants with program delivery managers, this is where this applies to you, program delivery managers, those applicants will still have the ability to complete the Applicant Impact Survey in Grants Portal once their request for public assistance is approved. However, the program delivery manager is still expected to contact them to conduct the exploratory call. And then in that call, you as the program delivery manager will either review their responses if they've responded to the survey already, or you will walk through the Applicant Impact Survey questions with them. Or maybe some combination of the two if they made it partway through but not all. In any case, after the exploratory call, the applicant will then start completing their list of impacts using the Damage Inventory template that's available in Grants Manager or Grants Portal. And as we pointed out earlier, you as the program delivery manager can start this right after the exploratory call and then share the draft with your applicant to basically help them out and help them get started. They can edit and then complete that document. The exploratory call for those applicants then, the ones that have program delivery managers, will be followed by the recovery scoping meeting, which, as we mentioned before, starts the clock for applicants to submit their list of disaster impacts. Just to recap the objectives of this call one more time, the purpose of this call is to, most importantly, establish that initial rapport and good working relationship between you as a program delivery manager and your applicant. Also, it is meant to introduce the Public Assistance Disaster Grant Program and the role of the Program Delivery Manager in that process, to identify at a high level the applicant's incident-related impacts and understand their overall recovery needs and priorities, to equip the applicant to begin preparing their list of impacts using the Damage Inventory template that's available in Grants Manager and Grants Portal, and then lastly to discuss and schedule the recovery scoping meeting. So we hope this micro-training has been helpful to you, but if you're looking for other useful information about the Public Assistance Program, you can also check out the Support Center of Grants Manager and Grants Portal, where you can find resources such as quick guides, frequently asked questions, and how-to videos, just to name a few. You can also contact the Grants Manager and Grants Portal hotline at 866-337-8448 or email FEMA-recovery-PA-grants at fema.dhs.gov if you have technical questions about the system. Programmatic or policy-related issues are best directed to your disaster leadership or to the Program Delivery Change Control Toolbox on SharePoint. Finally, FEMA's YouTube channel for Grants Manager and Grants Portal features a whole host of pre-recorded videos on a variety of related topics. These are available on demand to suit your schedule. A couple of things before we finish. First, please know that if you ever suspect corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, or misconduct in your work environment, you can report it by phone to the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General hotline at 1-800-323-8603, or you can write them by mail at DHS Office of Inspector General /mailstop0305, attention hotline at 245 Murray Lane Southwest, that's Murray, and that's in Washington, D.C., zip code 20528-0305. Additionally, FEMA makes procurement-related guidance available at www.fema.gov/grants/procurement. Here you can find information about procurement disaster assistance teams, which are in place to help FEMA and its partners understand early on the procurement-related impacts and requirements for accepting federal grant funding. The last thing we want, of course, is to have to take money back from an applicant because they didn't meet federal procurement regulations. You can also find here FEMA's procurement guidance for recipients and subrecipients under 2 CFR Part 200, the Uniform Rules, for additional details regarding federal procurement and contracting requirements. Thank you for watching. We hope this was helpful and that you join us for another microtraining again soon.